So my name is Maria, and I'm standing here with Alex from the National Safety Council.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for taking the time
pleasure.
for this quick talk. Yeah, we talked about your background just now, but can you briefly introduce yourself again and tell us, our viewers, a bit about it?
Alex Epstein.
Yeah.
I'm with the National Safety Council, which is a 100-year-old US-based nonprofit. And we have as our mandate
eliminating
preventable death on the job, so that's at workplaces, in home and communities, and on the road. My particular role is I'm the Director of Transportation Safety.
Wonderful. Perfect for this topic with safety and functional safety and operational safety.
Absolutely.
And what really challenges us industry focusing right now? Of course, safety, but can you go a bit in depth into this?
Well,
what kind of safety?
There are lots of issues that are currently facing the industry, and the number one issue I'd say is it's so new. So this field is so new. It hasn't evolved. Cars been around for 100 years, but this type of transportation has not. And because technology is increasing so quickly and capabilities are increasing, the newness of it all and the unforeseen consequences, the fact that technology has sometimes leads and sometimes follows, all make it a very interesting and challenging place to be.
I can imagine. This is also kind of the topic of your Challenge Your Peers session, because you are discussing the question, how good is a driver and how good should an autonomous driving car be? Should it be better as a human driver, or just as good as?
Well, I think that from our perspective, 94% of crashes in the United States, and we don't call them accidents, we call them crashes, in the United States are the result of human error, whether it's choices that have been made or errors in judgment. So if the driving system is not better than that, I don't really see the point.
Okay.
I don't see the point. 40,000 people a year will die on roadways in the US this year. So that's 100 people a day. And if these systems that we're talking about are not able to drive better than that, what's the point?
We had an interview with an attendee as well who said, okay, we are not giving humans a lot of credit. A lot of people saying, okay, the human driver is not as good as they could be, or the average human driver. Is this really true? Are we not giving ourselves enough credit for being a safe driver? I know we have people who are getting distracted and so on, but on average?
On average, humans are pretty good drivers. I mean, we drive hundreds of millions of miles a year collectively, and do so fairly well. But, you know, we should bear in mind that in the aviation industry in the United States, there was one fatality last year, and that was the first fatality in 7 years.
Wow. Okay, that is totally a different number. That is true.
So one fatality. This year, there will be 40,000 fatalities on the roads.
On the road.
And we accept that. As humans, we accept that. That's the price of mobility for us. And at the National Safety Council, we think automation is one way of solving the issue, and there are other ways as well. But we have to do better than that.
Yeah, I mean, if you just accept that 40,000 people are dying just because more or less, of course it's not a good place to be at.
Exactly.
But the humans, or we as a society, hear a lot about crashes with autonomous vehicles. We had the Tesla last year and a lot of other crashes. So the adoption is really key to that, to achieve these safe roads and safe mobility. How can OEMs and manufacturers really, what can they do to force these, not force, but encourage the adoption?
I think that there's a couple of things, but the first is to realize that there are no self-driving cars on the road today. There's zero. So what these are, as was pointed out by a speaker earlier, these are self-driving platforms. They're test platforms. They're not cars that are available. And the driving public, either because of OEM marketing or because of startup marketing, believes that the capabilities of these vehicles is actually much higher than the vehicles are able to perform. So there's a disconnect between what these cars actually do and what the driving public thinks they do. The driving public thinks these cars have much more ability than they really do. And so there's a certain amount of marketing hype that has to be diffused. Like, what is really happening now? 40% of there was a recent poll that was just presented, the results of which were just presented. 40% of Americans believe that they could go to their new car dealer and buy a car that drives itself.
Yeah, I have the same impression. Like, people actually expect that it's on the market, and this is why the roads are getting unsafe, which is of course not true, because where are these cars?
You can't buy one. It's impossible. And what they do confuse is the level 2 abilities of cars to keep in the lane or to have some form of automatic emergency braking. They confuse that with a self-driving capability. And from our perspective, that's incredibly dangerous. So how do you encourage adoption of level 5? Well, first you have to produce a level 5 that's safe, okay? It's almost as though it's vaporware right now, you know? It's the promise of this. So we have to get to a point where it exists. And then we have to understand that where it exists is probably going to be in a very limited domain. It's going to be in a corner of the United States that has perfect weather most of the time, you know? And it's going to have perfect infrastructure most of the time. But for big urban areas, for you know, the Northeast or the northern tier states that has snow and fog, it's going to be a long time. So,
but with what you're saying, because of this gap between the marketing and what the cars actually do and the fear of the persons who are, or the people on the road, how can we, put that all together that we don't have, like in 10 years when we probably have, or 15 years, level 4, level 5 autonomous driving cars, that the people don't fear them? Because right now it's a lot about fear and of course not understanding, like you said. So how can we diffuse this fear for the years to come?
I think that first of all, people have to be convinced of the fact that they work. They have to actually see them. Okay, so secondly, there has to be a reason for them. Why should I adopt them if it doesn't solve a problem that I have? And third of all, it's about what is the realistic expectation of what this vehicle is going to do. Am I actually, so we're in South San Francisco right now. Am I actually able to get into a self-driving car that could take me through San Francisco, through Sacramento, over the mountains, into Lake Tahoe, through snow, rain, fog, city streets, potholes? Can a vehicle do that? Well, until you show people that there is a vehicle that can do that.
Of course. So it's more or less a future that we...
It's a future. We're talking about a future state. What's great about this conference is that we are talking about, so OEMs, ride-hailing services, academics are talking about ways people can share data, about ways people can find some common ground to build things into the system so that there's a common way to talk about capabilities. There are common platforms to describe. And it's very hopeful, because this has not existed in the past. In the past there were silos that were being created, and people stayed within those silos and didn't share. And now we have open source platforms that people are developing, or safety structures that people are developing and giving freely to the community. And they want to adopt, and so that when it comes time, when there is such a thing as a level 5, we can say it has satisfied these requirements and people have signed on and agreed to. So I think that, it's a very real possibility, and conferences like this help bring that about.
Wonderful, good that you think like this. Just like a small step back, you talked about the community and the connectivity, also like the people who are developing these autonomous vehicles, but should we as society also get more connected in the mobility with these cars? Or yeah, is it like we had it in the 80s or the 90s where everybody had a car and this was a status symbol?
Well, I think the jury's out, as they say. Okay, we don't know what the future's going to be. Right now, there's a car ownership model. I own my vehicle. Is it going to change to some kind of structure where you own all the vehicles and I get to use one on occasion? In that case, it's not going to be a status symbol. It's going to be an appliance. And you know, it's going to be an interesting process because Detroit has marketed the vehicle to Americans as a symbol of freedom and a symbol of status and a symbol of some kind of sex appeal. And all that makes for why people go buy cars, in addition to safety features and capability and all kinds of other issues. And so it remains to be seen whether the vehicle turns into an appliance or it winds up continuing to be a vehicle that I can aspire to for personal ownership. So that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you very much for this short talk and about safety and the future of autonomous driving.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alex.